I think middle child syndrome also applies to TV shows. We're talking Buffy season 4. Hey there, welcome to another edition of the Sunday Scaries. I'm your host Mike, bringing you another Tuesday Terror as we review all the Buffy the Vampire seasons, and we're on season 4 this week. But before I dive into it, I just want to remind you we'll be having spoilers since we're reviewing all the seasons, and we're going pretty in-depth, which requires spoiling some of the main plot points in order to go in-depth and talk about them. We pick up where we left off last time. The high school got blown up. The Scooby Gang is all in college with the exception of Xander, who did not get into college, but everyone's kind of in a transition at this point. Buffy's trying to figure out what it's like to be in college. Willow has her boyfriend Oz and she's adjusting. Giles is no longer a watcher since he was removed during the 3rd season, and Wesley is now gone. Cordelia left the show, so some of the comic relief has also been removed, and Xander didn't make it into college, so he is just kind of working odd jobs, trying to figure out his place in the world, and he didn't really have much of a summer break. And you feel the awkwardness in this season, and this is one of the more hated seasons, I would say, though I still really enjoy it. Again, I don't think there's a truly horrible season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but you do feel it, and the show is trying to find a new direction now that the high school days are over. And Buffy, she no longer has a boyfriend. She starts dating early and having some really bad relationships with men. A little bit of her trauma comes out with her father leaving her mother, as she ends up having a one-night stand with a boy and he just completely ditches her, and she's like, what did I do? Is it me? And you really kind of feel for her as she's going through this awkward dating period. Willow and Oz they're doing their thing. They're pretty good overall, but they're transitioning the relationship, and Xander's trying to find his way in the world. Giles also in this season, he's a little out of place for most of the season because he's no longer a watcher. He's trying to figure out what his duties are and how to serve Buffy and the gang, and you kind of feel that awkward transition as a whole in this show. Now with Cordelia leaving the show, the creators decided to actually bring back Spike because he was such a fan favorite, and James Masters comes back and he's just doing his crazy stuff as always, and he's a great addition to the show as far as he's kind of evil and he goes through this transformation we'll get into where he becomes kind of good, or at least he's forced to be good and work with the Scooby Gang. And that's kind of the premise of this 4th season. They're re-going through kind of things that the 1st season did, where they're trying to reestablish some characters and figure out their new identities. And a lot of people can feel that when they go to college, right? They're trying to find a new identity, and the show picks up perfectly on that time frame in life. Now, they do a really interesting thing where they get away from demons being the big bads, and there's this whole undercover group called the Initiative, and they're disguised as students and faculty, and Buffy's actual psychology professor is the head of it, and she's a scientist, and her team are catching demons and doing research, and she's doing a project. And this guy named Riley Finn, who is her top secret agent, who's going in and leading teams. And over the course of the season, Buffy kind of catches his eye, and he doesn't know she's the Slayer, and she doesn't know that he's one of these secret agents, and they kind of have this romance and start hitting it off. And he's a really good guy. I know a lot of fans of the show don't like him and find him kind of boring, and we will get into some of that, but this is really the first guy that Buffy dates who's human. She actually could have some kind of future with, versus Angel, who, they were just completely damned from the start. And another interesting thing that happens in this is Willow goes through a change that I know a lot of people know what I'm talking about here. Her and Oz end up having to break up because he sort of cheats on her with another werewolf, even though he's in his wolf stage and he doesn't really know. But through this experience, he realizes that the wolf is making him dangerous to Willow, and he tells her that he needs to leave her and go find some kind of cure, some way for him to get the wolf under control. Willow goes through this whole heartbreak phase, and she really dives into her magic, and she ends up meeting this other girl named Tara, who she ends up falling for, and they have this relationship, and Willow ends up dating a woman, which at the time when this show came out was sort of revolutionary. There wasn't a lot of that type of stuff being on TV. I won't cover that too in depth in this review just because I know so many other YouTubers have talked about their relationship and its importance and its impact on a lot of fans, but there's something I think that's really missed early on in their relationship that a lot of fans don't talk about. And that's, Willow's really diving into her magic at this point, especially with Oz leaving, and you saw her starting to. And Tara fills a void of Oz where he gave her confidence in general in her social life. Tara begins to give her confidence in her magic because Tara is a witch. Tara has a lot of knowledge about magic, and even though Tara is much weaker in terms of magical ability than her, she serves as this kind of anchor for Willow and gives her the strength to do magic. And you can tell she's really drawn to her partially because of this. And even early on in this relationship, you start to see Willow is becoming obsessed with magic, and it won't be a big issue in this season, but you see the seeds later on to where she's going to have some issues controlling her own strength. Tara really is the person that allows her to open up her full range of magical abilities because she kind of needs her as a guide, separate from their relationship. Now, another great thing that happens in the season is Spike actually gets a chip in his head that forces him to not kill people. And he can still kill demons and hurt things that are not human, but he cannot hurt people anymore, which means he cannot hurt Buffy. And early in the season he doesn't have the chip in his head, and he's working with Harmony, who got turned into a vampire. And Harmony was a girl in Buffy's class who was one of kind of Cordelia's sidekick popular girls, and she's a really funny, goofy vampire. And Spike is totally using her just to fill a void because Drusilla left him, but she's hilarious, and her kind of dingbat comedic relief also on the show is a lot of fun in her episodes. But when Spike gets this chip in his head, he becomes completely dependent on the Scooby Gang, and once he realizes he can still kill demons, he sort of teams up with them, and he's all guns blazing, like, yeah, let's kill some vampires, yeah, let's kill some demons. And this is really, we get to see James Masters be a lot of fun as Spike. And as the show goes on, we get some really cool scenes where Oz does come back after Willow's already fallen in love with this girl Tara, and she ends up choosing Tara over Oz. And again, I think some of that is partially because she's so attracted to the magic that Tara can open up for her. And then, Riley discovers Buffy is a Slayer, and they are able to bond over that because he's stronger than a normal guy because of his training and some drugs they're pumping into him, and she's stronger than anybody she's ever met. I mean, they go for a fight. He's still bruised the next day. She's just completely healed, fighting demons. And as the season goes on, it turns out the initiative is evil. Professor Walsh is doing all these horrible projects, and she's building the super demon. And once she discovers Buffy is the Slayer, and she's kind of taking Finn away from the initiative, she wants to stage her death, which backfires, and Finn is just devastated. But then this Frankenstein monster, Adam, wakes up, who's made of all these different demons and human parts and robotics, and he's super strong and tough to beat up, kills her. And he's got this vision of taking over the initiative, creating all these super demons, and kind of making this almost like a new race and finishing Maggie Walsh's project. And, he's super creepy. I think this is also part of where some of the love-hate with this season comes in, because Adam is sort of a bland villain. He's not the most likable, even though he's kind of intimidating and that he is so strong. And he's sort of a weak big bad as far as you just can't connect with him as the audience. But I still have a lot of fun with him, and I really like some of the projects he's doing behind the scenes with the initiative and his whole plan to take things over. But summing up the end of the season, pretty much Willow uses magic to give Buffy the strength of her and her friends, and that's how she's able to defeat Adam. And then it's interesting, that's the second to last episode, but the last episode is this whole dream sequence, and I really love the final episode where the first Slayer is haunting the dreams of Willow, Giles, Xander, and Buffy, and the first Slayer is killing her friends, and she learns about kind of how the first Slayer was given the power a little bit, but this first Slayer is almost angry that she has friends and thinks she has to do it alone, and it's really interesting, and that's a good way that the season ends. And this season is a little misunderstood, you know, there's some amazing episodes. You know, I love Spike getting the chip in his head and his comedic relief in a lot of them. The episode Hush, which is actually the episode Buffy and Riley discover they're not who they say they are. There's about a 20-minute sequence in Hush where these creepy villains called the Gentlemen, they take away everyone's voices because a scream will kill them, and then they go around cutting people's hearts out. But there's 20 minutes where there's just no sound at all, almost no dialogue, but almost no sound. And I'm also a little biased that I used to work at UCLA, and most of the college scenes are filmed at UCLA, which is always fun. But you also do have some really low moments, like Beer Bad is horrible, where Buffy gets turned into like a Neanderthal cave woman along with some of these college guys. That's just a horrible episode, and there's a bunch like that are just kind of boring. You know, there is a lot of good character growth in this season, and so I do think it gets a little more hate than it deserves, and I do get that Riley's not quite as lovable as Angel, but you know, the other side characters outside of Buffy, they do some growth. Giles, not so much, but Xander and Anya really develop their relationship, and that's fun to see Anya learning how to be human after being a demon for over 1,000 years, and she's just very quirky and blunt and doesn't know how to talk. You know, Willow, Oz, and Tara, that whole triangle is really interesting to watch, especially when Oz comes back after sort of finding a cure. And one other interesting thing about the season is Angel now has a spin-off show, and he makes a few appearances here and there in the show, but you can actually watch now a Buffy episode and then an Angel episode starting in season 4 of Buffy and season 1 of Angel, and they play off each other. And there's all these references in there because Angel's down in LA and Buffy's up in Sunnydale, California, which that's really cool. Also, Faith comes back for 2 episodes. She wakes up from a coma, and that's a great whole scene where she switches bodies with Buffy. And anyway, she ends up getting away, and there's some drama with her going to Angel and Angel trying to reform her. That's in the Angel series that's not necessarily in the show, but the whole Faith thing is really cool, and you kind of see the beginning of her redemption arc, which will play into later seasons. Now, some of the themes in this, the first one that I'm not going to get too into because I do find it boring, and I get why a lot of fans don't like the season because of that, is just this whole Adam being like this Frankenstein, and is just Adam being this whole Frankenstein and trying to figure out his purpose. And of course his purpose is to like destroy the world, but he's just kind of a boring, generic metaphor that we've seen in a lot of other horror movies, but also other types of genre movies with the whole Jekyll and Hyde and Frankenstein kind of thing going on. But it does also tie into the whole you can't trust the government thing, and it gets really deep. You know, Riley doesn't even know that they're pumping him full of drugs, and he's dependent on their food, and he gets sick when he runs away after Professor Walsh betrays Buffy, and you know, her whole secret projects he had no idea about, taking apart demons and making the super monster. But it's typical to like Alien with the Wayland Corporation. And Riley and Buffy's relationship's really interesting because this is sort of the first guy she could actually have a future with, because he's a normal human, but also still sort of has her strength. But at the same time, she's been devastated by Angel, and I gotta say, I do believe Angel is Buffy's true love, and I know there's a lot of debate amongst that with fans, but if you have any doubt and you've not seen the Angel series, I believe it's episode 8 or 9, it's called I Will Remember You. Watch that episode of Angel after you've watched the first few episodes of this season, and if that doesn't prove that Angel and Buffy should have been together somehow and they're each other's true loves, I don't know what will. Riley coming in is sort of interesting because she kind of is on a rebound in a sense from Angel, and even though he's a great guy, he's perfect, you know, you kind of see that she's not going to be able to give him her entire heart, even though he's absolutely in love with her. And then Spike needing the Scooby Gang is really interesting once he gets the chip in his head, and that'll develop into later seasons because he's kind of rooting for them. He's losing his big bad, and the chip almost forces him in a sense to have a soul, because he's constantly, anytime he's going to do something horrible, gets this pain in his head and he's told, you know, that's wrong. And him having to live this life where he's not murdering innocent people slowly kind of makes him a good guy, even though he doesn't have a soul like Angel. And it's a really interesting journey. And one of my favorite Spike moments, I just gotta say, is in the final episode where in the dream sequence, I think it's Willow walks up, it might be Xander, but to Giles, and he's on a swing set with Spike, and Spike's dressed up like Giles, and he's like, I'm training to be a watcher. Like, just stuff like that is so much fun with Spike. And the final thing I'm going to touch on, since a lot of my points I covered in the recap of the season, is this whole idea of the first Slayer. Because up until this point, no one's really thought, like, who is the first Slayer? Where did they come from? And this idea that the first Slayer spirit is still looming, because, you know, it's a very mystical power. One Slayer dies, another Slayer gets activated, and you know, it's really kind of cool to see the origins of that. And they really build off it in later seasons, but this one plants the seeds. And I love Buffy realizing, you know, what makes her different than a lot of other Slayers is she does have friends, she does depend on others, and, you know, that gives her a different level of strength that maybe some of the other Slayers haven't had. And next season, you get to explore a little bit about some of the other Slayers. All right, guys, so my overall ranking for this season is a 3 out of 5. This is definitely, for me, the weakest one so far that we've reviewed. And again, it's a lot of the filler episodes just are misses. When it's on its highs, it's some of the best Buffy you can get. Again, the episode Hush is just amazing, and I love that episode. Along with a lot of the Spike getting reform stuff. And I do think the initiative is interesting, but you know, the early parts where Buffy's getting her butt kicked and has to re-find her identity by a group of vampires, and some of the bad roommate stuff and the beer bad episode, and I can't stand the whole Parker storyline. Who, with that said, my overall fun ranking is a 3.5 out of 5. You know, it's a little bit higher than my overall quality ranking. Again, it's still a good time. The good episodes are really good. It's just the bad episodes, you know, you don't want a ton to do with and are not that rewatchable. But still a good season overall of Buffy. If this was the lowest moment of most TV shows, TV would be a lot better off. And with that said, thanks for tuning in. Please subscribe and like, and tune in next Tuesday for Buffy Season 5 film review on our Tuesday Terror series. And just know I appreciate y'all tuning in. And all I know is next week, I'm really excited to talk about a better villain than Adam.